Hello, everybody. Welcome to this module about temporal and sequential analysis of educational data. My name is Bodong Chen. I'm coming from the University of Pennsylvania. As we're getting started to dive into this module, I want to first mention that we'll be using R in this module. If you're coming from Python, don't worry. And knowing Python will set up you nicely to make sense of the code you see in this module. And also you'll find very similar packages and tools in the Python ecosystem to do very similar things, if not better things, than those tools I introduced in this module. And you're encouraged to use tools such as RStudio or Jupyter Notebook or something else that's similar as you're playing with those codes I have in this module. And you're also encouraged to familiarize with a specific framework in R that's called Tidyverse, which provides a list of packages to make your life easier, such as to read data, to wrangle data, or to do cool visualizations using R. So just a heads up, if you're interested in learning more about that, there's a link in the slides you can click on and learn more about. So here we're talking about temporal analysis of data. And the reason we're talking about this, this issue is educational activities unfold over time and they're temporal. And these days, we face this great opportunity and reality that sometimes it's a challenge as well, that we have such high resolution information stored in digital learning systems that are waiting to be discovered, that are waiting to be leveraged to answer questions that we care about. That's true for Canvas, this tool we're using. That's true for example, for digital games you might be deploying. That's true for reading apps that maybe your project involves deploying to some school districts to support learners from younger ages. So there are all kinds of digital learning platforms that are recording high resolution temporal data about learning and teaching. And for me, as someone who are coming from the field of learning analytics, I think it's a great opportunity facing us to think more about this question of how we can leverage temporal data in education. However, there are challenges for this task. And there are many challenges researchers have written about. It can be conceptual, can be practical, can be methodological. And that's why we don't see, or we often see, temporal analysis is underexplored in a lot of research because we don't really pay a lot of attention to how we can use, or how we can think about temporality, and how we can use temporal analysis techniques to answer questions that are about the time, that's about the sequence in learning. And that's exactly why we're here to dive into this topic in this module. And to get started thinking about this, I think the first thing we can consider is, what are the possible temporal data in education? And this question, I think it's very, it's something that can be interesting to think about from your own context. And I have to admit, I'm coming from a context that could be very limited in terms of thinking about this possibility. And I welcome your imagination and your contributions to this question from your unique professional background. But from my view, as I think about temporal data in education, and especially in digital learning systems, I will think about, for example, every semester, my students will be asked to enroll in courses. So one type of temporal information in my university is, in the student information system will be a lot of records about when the students select a course and which course they select. And using this information, we can ask a really simple question. By simple, I mean they're pretty important and straightforward questions, such as what are the common learning pathways in the program? based on students' course enrollment data. If we further combine this question or this data with student performance, you can ask questions such as, what are the most maybe productive or promising learning pathways for a particular group of students in a particular program based on their course enrollment data and then their learning performance data. So you can kind of combine different sources of data and ask questions that can go deeper in certain direction. And another type of data I can think of could be in learning management systems, such as Canvas, which we're using in this training program. And question we can ask using this type of more fine-grained data about learning behaviors could be, what are the common learning patterns of students during a course or during 1 week of the course? Because this type of data has more granularity. We can zoom into weeks, days, or even seconds, if that matters for a particular question. And there are other types of digital learning data we can think of as well, such as, in eye tracking system, we will have information about eye movements that are mapped onto the screen. And if you're deploying a specific learning or reading intervention, right, to a district, using eye tracking, you might be able to ask questions such as, what engagement patterns exist when students are asked to read a digital textbook using iPad, for example. So those type of data, they're all temporal, and they're, even though they have different kind of granularity, which will be conducive to different kind of question, but they are all rich in some way in terms of having temporal information and can allow us to answer different kinds of questions that are pertinent to learning and teaching. And as we think about those different kind of questions, I want to mention that there's some questions that are exploratory, such as, what are the patterns in the data? Some of them are more predictive, such as, can we predict the next event given this current sequence of actions? Or can we predict a learning outcome given the sequence observed from the student in the first 5 weeks or 10 weeks of this course? Right, that's more predictive, that's leveraging temporal information in learning. Or it can be more causal, and does this event that happened earlier, or does it cause another type of result that happens later, right? The temporality is embedded in the causal question we can ask there as well. So there are all kinds of questions, or types of questions we can ask that are helpful in some way. It could be helpful, for example, ask exploratory question in the very beginning of a research project, and that are leading towards posing or answering some causal questions that are of interest to a larger project. But regardless of the type of the question we ask, my colleagues and I, we have urged us to think about a few things, as we're doing temporal analysis. We ask or urge us to think about how we can conceptualize the learning constructs. Which kind of learning constructs we're thinking about, we're care about, as in this analysis. One popular construct, for example, could be self-regulated learning. How we can think about self-regulation in a particular context, and how this particular construct is temporal. And then using that insight, we can better translate this construct into particular methodological treatment of the data. Or we can better imagine how this construct can be reflected in the digital data we're tracking in the system. And we can make better choices about, which kind of techniques will be appropriate for capturing this construct or for asking questions related to this construct. And also in a paper we wrote together, we're also listing a few questions or meta question that can be useful for planning or guiding temporal analysis. Again, this question are posted here, such as what are the key construct, where are the construct observed and how they are presented in data, how are the constructs analyzed with regard to their temporal features. And the final question is about action taken, right? After you do this kind of analysis, how this result can provide specific insight that can be used to guide actions that can impact learning processes. So those questions are just raised here as we're getting started to explore this topic. We can circle back to this question and reflect on this later. But I hope just by starting with thinking about temporal analysis, thinking about data we have in our different kind of digital learning systems, and think about how possibly complex and rich this question can get. I hope that's helpful and exciting for you to get started with this module. And for us in this module, we'll attempt to ask this question and play with different kind of tools for temporal analysis. So I'll see you later. Thank you.